Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Grief and Gathering podcast, a podcast where we use our understanding of Magic the Gathering and its themes to tackle hard to grasp topics such as sex and death and other mental health complexities. I'm your host, Dr. Ivy Foxglove, and today we are taking a bit of a break from all the heavy because, oh my God, the world's been heavy. The world has been so heavy. And a lot of these first few episodes have been about grief, which makes sense. I mean, this podcast is called Grief and Gathering, but I figured we deserve a break. And just like we talked about in a couple episodes ago, it's important to take breaks. But even when we take breaks, there are still topics to discuss, and there are still worthwhile conversations to be having. So, what can we do to still talk about hard, challenging mental health issues? What can we talk about that uses Magic the Gathering? And what can we talk about that's a little fun? Hmm. If you haven't guessed it by now, we're talking about sex. Yep, that's right. We are talking about sex and all of the horribly awkward, but very, very fun things that it entails. But, Ivy, I thought this was a Magic the Gathering podcast. I thought we were talking about magic and using Magic the Gathering to talk about and help grow our understanding of other topics. How can we do that with something like sex? Those are completely different. You may think, yes, they are. And also, no, they are not. I think, if you don't already, you might see by the end of this episode that they're actually pretty similar. Um, but as always, this is about the time where I feel like I should share a content warning. We're talking about sex. We're talking about kink. We are getting down and dirty. We are getting deep into. I don't have a good Magic the Gathering analogy. I was going to say like graveyard, but that didn't sound right. Um, yeah, we're talking about sex, and it's going to be awkward. And there might be some moments where you're like, "Ugh, I don't know about this." And that's okay. Lean into it. Leaning into discomfort is, I think, one of the best things we can do in our lives. There is a lot that's going to come along that's going to make us feel uncomfortable, that we're going to have to decide, do we want to just accept it and kind of move on? Or do we want to let ourselves be uncomfortable? And my challenge for all of you, if you're in a space to sit with this, let's be uncomfortable together, right? Let's let ourselves feel a little bit uneasy. And let's let ourselves feel and focus on something other than all the horrible shit that's been going on. Because sex, like anything else, is supposed to be fun. Just like playing a game, just like a hobby you enjoy. You're supposed to have sex because you enjoy it. And it's hard to enjoy something when you're so wrapped up in, oh, is this awkward? Oh, is it horrible? Blah, 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 blah. The short answer is yes. Sex is awkward. Learning how your own body responds to things, learning about who you are, what you like, what you don't like, learning about how you respond to another person, how that other person responds to you. learning about your sexuality, learning about if you're monogamous or polyamorous or none of the above, learning about if you're demi, learning about if you're asexual or if you're aromantic and you're having to juggle your desire to have sex. So many things. It's all messy. And good sex is messy. And that's okay. We're allowed to make messes. We're allowed to do things that are messy. I want you all to think back to the first time you had sex. No, I'm kidding. I want you to think back to the first game of Magic the Gathering you played. Did you know what was going on? I sure as fuck didn't. I had no idea what I was doing. Did you stop after that one time, even though you were like, this was weird and different and kind of confused? Also, no, you probably didn't, because guess what? You're here listening to this, and no one else would be listening other than you fucking nerds who, just like me, love this silly little card game that we all play and have made our lives way too focused around. But, here we are. Um, but, there's a lot of pressure to be good at sex. There's a lot of pressure to know what you want. Um, there's a lot of pressure from like our horny ass Magic the Gathering community. Like, I don't know if you all have seen it, but there are some horny people that also like to play this card game. Um, I love it. I mean, it shows like, when I was a kid, when I was in school, everyone always laughed, "Oh, the only people who play Magic the Gathering are, oh, the gross, ugly nerds and blah, 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 and they're virgins, yada, yada, yada." And some folks are virgins, some folks aren't. But as we know, I'm doing a little plug here for my lovely, lovely acquaintances over at Scrybabies. We know hot people play Magic. And the majority of our community is pretty damn hot. But it's funny seeing how big of an intersection there is between folks who play this game and folks who do sex work, folks who play this game and folks who are really open about their enjoyment of sex, folks who play this game and are very sex positive people. And I was wondering why that is. And I think a big part of it, and I was asking myself, okay, so Ivy, you are someone who, one of your focuses is on sex and all of the things that come with that and intimacy and all of these pieces. So, what is it for you? Like, why is it that someone like you is also so interested in this game? And my hypothesis that is completely untested and completely, well, not completely unfounded, but yes, very much so, so untested. Um, the reason I'm able to enjoy Magic the Gathering so much is because I know how to communicate. The reason people enjoy sex so much is because they know how to communicate. And so it makes sense that a large presence of our community are people who do some type of sex work, are very interested in sex, all of those things, because sex work, enjoying sex, having sex be a part of your life requires good, strong, consistent communication. And you know what else requires good, strong, consistent communication? Magic the Gathering. Well, having fun in Magic the Gathering. I guess anyone can play it, but If you are bad at communicating, you're not going to have a very good time while you do it. You're honestly probably going to be pretty miserable the whole time. Communication is what helps us feel seen. It's what helps us feel heard. It's what helps us enjoy what we're doing. So this might be the time where you're asking yourself, where the fuck are you going with this? Great. We talked about sex. We talked about magic. Awesome. What if I told you that I think Magic the Gathering and your ability to play it makes you more able to engage in intimate, meaningful, and really crazy fun, fulfilling sex? What the fuck do you mean? Yeah, I know, it's crazy. Um, Stick with me though. Our amazing father of this format, Sheldon Menery. I didn't know him well enough to know how he'd feel about his name being dropped in an episode about sex. I like to think he'd be on board with it though. You know, him and his colleagues are the ones who formed this idea of Rule Zero. What is Rule Zero? Maybe for those of you who aren't in the commander sphere, what is Rule Zero? And briefly put, Rule Zero is this rule in the commander format that I feel like has extended to other formats in the Magic community space. But it's this rule saying all these other rules that we've talked about, the ban list, turn order, starting life totals, mulligan rules, all of that, those are suggestions. And at the end of the day, what's most important is this concept of Rule Zero, which is this concept that you and the people you're playing with sit down and have an open, honest, frank communication about what it is that you're looking for in this game. If you're okay with people running banned cards or non-partner pairs as their commanders. And it also consists then, it goes hand in hand with the pregame conversation. What kind of game are we hoping to play, right? This is when you sit down and you say, are we hoping to play, are we doing something competitive, right? Are we playing CEDH? Are we playing low power pre-constructed decks? Are we playing, I run a lot of combos in my deck and I have a lot of tutors. Is that fine? I run a lot of interaction, a lot of counter spells, a lot of removals that feel okay with people. Talking about when your deck can win. My deck usually tries to go off around turn 6, turn 7, things like that. The key to a good game starts with being able to have those conversations. It starts with being able to be upfront and say, here's the kind of game I'm looking to have right now. And the folks who stay enjoying this format and this game, more often than not, are people who have a pretty good idea of how to have that conversation. There are people who have pretty strong communication skills and are able to say what they're looking for and what they do and don't want in the game that they're about to play. Because you're about to spend a couple hours at least playing with these people. You want to make sure that it feels good. Let's move over to sex. You're going to be spending a couple hours playing with that person or those other people too. And again, we want to make sure that it feels good. And so, just like we can have a pregame conversation, our Rule Zero conversation before we start a game of Magic, you can translate those skills of communication into the bedroom or kitchen or living room or backyard tool shed, I don't know, wherever. But you can translate those skills. It's okay before you start anything. It's okay to ask your potential partner what they're after. It's okay to check in with yourself and be like, what do I want from sex this go around? Maybe I want a rough and wild, I want scratches down my back. I want to be bumped and bruised by the time I'm done. I don't want to be able to walk for 2 weeks by the time I'm done in here. Or maybe it's, no, I want a really passionate, soft, sensual, sexy makeout session. And a little bit of sex, whatever that looks like, is going to be great. But what I'm craving is that physical touch and that intimacy. I just want to be close right now. And whatever sex comes from that is great. Be upfront about kinks, y'all. There are two shitty things that can happen in our world, one in magic, one in sex. In magic, it is such a shitty feeling when you sit down with someone and they are like, we're like, oh, we're just going to have a casual game. It's going to be sweet. And next thing you know, one of the players on turn 2 is like, oh, Mox, oh, soaring, oh, into this, into this, into this. I win. That doesn't feel good. More often than not, that doesn't feel good. You know what else doesn't feel good? Trying to slip in a kink before you've talked about it to your partners. Don't do that, y'all. Don't just try and drop some ass play or piss play or something. Don't just try and drop that onto your partner without telling them about it. It's not going to go well. Embrace the uncomfortability that comes with having hard conversations. And this doesn't just start at the beginning. This starts throughout the whole game, throughout the whole sex. Check in. In Commander, when you're between games with people, a lot of times people check in. How was that? How did that first game feel to everyone? Did we feel like that was kind of what we were going after? Or did we want it to be different? Do the same in sex. Do the same in sex. Do the same while you're having sex. Check in. There is nothing hotter than someone who cares that everyone's having a good time. There is nothing more attractive than someone who is willing to shift and adapt what they're doing, change things up, be flexible, so that they know everyone around them is having a fun time. Apply that flexibility. Be willing to shift and be willing to check in and be willing to be told no. In a Commander game, it's a little negotiable, but it's still disappointing, right? If we're playing a game, I really want to bust out Tiny Bones, which okay, the Tiny Bones joke was not intentional. But I heard myself say it and I started laughing. But maybe I want to play Tiny Bones Trinket Thief and it's a super discard heavy deck and the rest of the pot is like, Ivy, what the fuck are you doing? Put that away. No. I don't want to play with that. You say, oh fuck, are you sure? Okay, fine. Now in the bedroom it's non-negotiable. If someone says no, you fucking stop and you stop instantly. But in Tiny Bones or in sex, you whip out your Tiny Bones and you say, hey, I want to play with this, and someone says, no. Yeah, it might be disappointing, but you still stop and you shift and you do something else. I have like 20 decks in front of me that I could have picked. And I just picked Tiny Bones because it's like one of my meanest, least fun decks that people don't really like to play against. But Tiny Bones probably wasn't the one to pick for this episode. Or maybe it was. I don't know. It's all a matter of perspective, I guess. But communicate. And it's uncomfortable. That's why in the beginning of this, we were talking about discomfort. It's hard. It's hard to tell someone, "Hey, I really like what you're doing. Please don't stop doing that." Or, "Hey, I don't like it when you touch me there. Um, no, I'm not into foot stuff. No, I don't like it when you put things in my butt. So please don't do that anymore." It's okay to say things like that. And I'm laughing because it's also okay for things to be silly. Sex is supposed to be fun. We're supposed to be able to enjoy sex. But the last thing I want to chat about is those tiny subtleties. How many times have you been playing a game with someone and maybe you've noticed that it just kind of seems like they're not into it anymore? They lost their enthusiasm, they are just kind of going through the motions. They're just not really into it anymore. They're not. You've noticed a shift in eye contact, you've noticed a shift in body language, things like that. You notice those things. A lot of people notice those things. And it's not abnormal for you to check in with the person after a game and be like, "Hey, are you good? I noticed, it didn't seem like you were feeling this. Are you okay? Should we stop? Do you want to keep going? Do you want to switch things up?" You can do that same thing in the bedroom. If it looks like your partner's not enjoying things, stop. The second you get an inkling that they're not on board with something, even if they haven't said so, fucking stop what you're doing. Um, but it's also okay to check in. It's okay to stop mid thrust and say, "Honey, are you doing okay? It doesn't seem like you're into this. Do you want to stop or do you want to try something different?" And you're talking about intimacy. What an intimate moment. What an intimate moment to be willing to stop what should be a very pleasurable activity and say, "Let's check in. Let's see what's going on." Talk about building intimacy. Oh my God. But the reason I brought all of these things up is because you all already fucking know how to do these things because you do them when you play Magic. And if you can do them with strangers sitting around a table or a pod of friends that you may or may not know very well, you can do them in the bedroom. If you can have these hard conversations with people about a game, you can have these hard conversations with people about sex. And that's the message I wanted to send home with you all. But lastly, please don't take it so seriously. Magic the Gathering is fun when you let it be. And sex is fun when you let it be. But by communicating, we can make sure that all parties involved are staying informed, enthralled, and engaged in intercourse. I had to make it weird. But thank you all for spending some time with me today. We'll be back again next week. I don't know if we're going to be back to talking about sad shit or if we're going to talk about more sex or whatever. If there's ever a topic that you would like to talk about and see if there's any way that we can think of that Magic the Gathering helps broach a hard topic to discuss, let me know. Reach out to me. But in the meantime, my name is Ivy Foxglove. I am a doctor of psychology who specializes in death and sex and trauma and all of the things nobody likes to talk about. This has been the Grief and Gathering podcast. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you all very soon.